Our next guest says that the next federal election could see, quote, Trumpism, with Australian characteristics being played out here. Well, joining us now from Canberra is Director of the Australian Studies Institute, Mark Kenny. Thank you so much, Mark, for taking the time to speak with us today. We just heard there, the concerns from the streets. Now, that quote, Trumpism with Australian characteristics, came from an article that you wrote last month. Let's first look at this economy. Which was one of the deciding factors for American voters. We had falling inflation, we had rising job numbers, and still Americans felt that they were still struggling on a daily basis. We're seeing similar economic conditions here in Australia. Are voters definitely feeling a similar dissatisfaction with their political leaders?
Well, everything that we see from the polling and from sort of politicians, what they're reflecting back to us, suggests that that is the case, that cost of living is the primary concern of voters. And when cost of living is a primary concern, a lot of other things fall away. And we saw that happen really in the US. As you said, the fundamentals of the US economy are actually very strong. The economy is going gangbusters, actually, and we've just seen another interest rate cut. Inflation is low, job numbers are high. It really is quite a strong economy, one of the strongest in the world. But the experience that people feel is another thing. So this is a sort of a contest between lived experience and what they hear as political messaging. And Donald Trump spoke directly to that pain. He gave voters to believe that he understood, he heard what their experience was, and he was promising to fix it. Whether we believe that he can fix it or that he will fix it in the sort of simple way that he proposes, that's another matter. But that was the political messaging and the political mechanism, really, that I think turned this election.
Now, your article explores the way opposition leader Peter Dutton is tapping into that, shall we say, Trump as the voice of the people strategy. How are you seeing this? What sort of examples would you have?
Well, it's really mostly in rhetoric, but it is in some ways in policy as well. We see Peter Dutton proposing this kind of Australia First approach. We see that in respect of housing policy. He recently announced a proposal that would see a ban on people coming to Australia and being able to buy houses quite quickly, non-citizens, for example. And the messaging around that was we want to provide houses for the people that need them most, i.e. Australians. Those were his words. So there's that kind of thing. We see it also in the general cost of living relief stuff. There's this sort of endless talk about the experience that ordinary Australians are feeling, and you tie all that in with things like immigration. There's the opposition's making a big pitch on dramatically reducing the number of people who are coming here from abroad. It's obviously at a very high number at the moment, and it's a complex issue. There are a whole range of reasons why that migration is high. But we see the government responding to that as well with bans on or caps on overseas students and the like. So there are whole ways in which our political debate is being shaped by some of the same forces we saw at play in the US.
In the aftermath of the US presidential elections, we saw Democratic Senator Bernie Sanders lashing out at his own party, saying that they had lost touch with the traditional working class base. Has Labor lost touch with its traditional working class base across Australia?
I guess we're about to find out, but there is a sense that could be a similar process in Australia, that we could see a similar kind of realigning going on. The realignment in the US has really been quite spectacular. You know, the Democrats, the party of unions and the organised working class, has really become the party of professionals and people who are quite affluent, whereas the Republicans have remade themselves, particularly under Donald Trump, as the party of the working class. And the election result that we saw there really reflected that it's been an ongoing realignment, but Trump has come along and really accelerated that, particularly the white working class in the case of Trump, but also Latinos. We saw Latinos voting in significant numbers for Trump as well. In Australia, there's there's interesting things that have been going on over the last few electoral cycles. The advent of the Teals, the rise of the Greens in the inner cities, the sense that Labor is much more strongly a party of the inner cities and is sort of duking it out with the Greens for some of those seats. And Peter Dutton saying that the Liberal Party is no longer the party of big business, it's the party of working people. And his strategy is very much around targeting to Australians in the suburbs and the regions. You know, people who drive utes, people who are self-employed, a whole range of people who in the past you might have said were part of Labor's natural constituency, but that is now being targeted by the coalition.
Okay, but Labor is in a very difficult position here, aren't they? You know, the economic conditions are improving here in Australia, but it seems the vibe isn't. So no matter what they offer, and we're seeing the lowering of the student debt, that sort of thing, it's the continued post-pandemic voter dissatisfaction that will play out at the ballot box, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, Fawzia. I mean, it's perceptions that actually matter. It doesn't matter if the numbers look good or if the outlook is particularly promising. It matters whether people believe that. It matters what they feel on the ground. I think the curse of the 2020s is incumbency. We're seeing that now in elections around the world. It is very difficult. And of course, Labor is now at best about level pegging with the coalition in a number of the polls that we see, either level pegging or perhaps falling a bit behind. Now that obviously can change. But being in power at the moment, as you say, in the overhang from the pandemic itself was very disruptive. It altered people's perceptions of government and satisfaction with government and with politicians. And of course, the inflation that we've been dealing with since is very much the overhang from all of the stimulus spending through the pandemic. That's the case in the US, and it's the case here as well. So what people feel and how they are experiencing the economy is overwhelming pretty much the facts that they might have told to them by politicians.
It's a really interesting topic. Mark Kenny, thank you so much for sharing your insight with us. Mark Kenny, there, Director of the Australian Studies Institute. Thank you.
Thank you, Fawzia.